Hey chess friends, do you like attacking chess? Well, then you have definitely to see this video. I'm gonna show you a game in which a very strong grandmaster is getting defeated in only 28 moves. And in this very short time, you're gonna see some amazing moves, amazing piece sacrifices, and a lovely mating attack. But before I'm gonna show you, I would kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel so that in the future you can see more games like this. Let's get started. It's the game David Navarra against David Anton, played in the Champions Chess Tour. White opens with the move d4, d5, c4, e6, and after knight c3, bishop b4, we have a Nimzo Indian we often saw in the World Championship match between Ding Liren and Jan Nepomniachtchi. White goes for the move a3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and now black would love to take the pawn on c4, but if you do that, there is the move e4. White gets a very nice pawn center and will regain the pawn very soon. So instead, David Anton played first the move knight f6, trying to gain control over that e4 square. So d takes c4 is now actually a much stronger idea. And therefore white plays the move e3, so that in case of a capture on c4, white is able to recapture with the bishop. On the downside of this move is that the bishop on c1 doesn't have an active square to go to. All these pawns are placed on dark squares, so the bishop is struggling. But the same can be said for black's bishop on c8, and the next move may have come as a surprise. Black goes for the move c6. Look at this pawn formation. All these pawns are placed on dark squares. This bishop on c8 doesn't look very happy, but we will get to see a very interesting plan soon. White plays the move a4. And now black has to be a little bit careful, because if white does get the chance, he will play the move bishop to a3, preventing the black king from castling. So the obvious move for black here is to castle first. And after bishop a3, white attacks the rook on f8. Black goes rook e8. So the rook is absolutely fine, and white continues developing with the move knight f3. And interestingly, this position was played before by both players. David Navarra had a game in this position with the white pieces, and David Anton had it before with the black pieces. In both of these games, black played the move b6, which is a very sensible move. But for this occasion, David Anton plays the move queen to c7 first. Subtle move, but the queen is doing pretty well here, potentially getting ready for the opening of the c-file, but the queen will also become very effective on the c7 h2 diagonal. Watch out for that diagonal, guys. White goes queen c2. Maybe not really needed. There are other ways of playing, like bishop d3, or maybe the bishop could also go to e2. But anyway, queen c2 was played, and only now black goes for the move b6. So the idea is that black would love to get a bishop to a6, putting pressure on the pawn on c4. And well, if the pawn is getting swapped somehow, let's say c takes d5, c takes d5, which was played in the game, then the bishop is ready to go to a6 very soon as well, hoping to trade off the light squared bishops, after which the c4 square may become a nice spot for one of the black pieces, either a knight or maybe the queen. So for instance, let me illustrate this line. If white would play bishop d3, natural developing move, bishop a6 would be the right way to play. If bishops are getting exchanged now and you continue with castling, black is going to put a rook on the c-file. There's tremendous pressure against this pawn. Now after, let's say, rook c1, you can even play knight e4, and white has a lot of trouble defending this pawn. Black is a bit better here, as this bishop looks as if it's a nice piece, but it's not really attacking anything. So in general, I think white should try to avoid the exchange of bishops. Look what happened. There followed bishop b5, attacking the rook. Black plays bishop d7, as we understand that the exchange of bishops would definitely help black. And now white decides to go for the move bishop to d3 back. So now black's idea with bishop a6 is no longer possible. So we have succeeded in keeping the bishops on the board, but the bishop on d7 is not that badly placed at all. Black goes for knight c6 with the idea that very soon probably the knight can come to a5. The knight at the side of the board looks as if it's not doing much, but you're guarding this c4 square where the knight can potentially be anchored. white decided to castle, and you would expect now the move knight a5, with the idea that you would like to come in with a knight to c4. But in that case, something like knight e5 is not that simple, and you don't want to come to c4, after which the pieces are getting exchanged and black will be forced to get a pawn on c4. That's not what you want. You would like to keep the c file open. So knight a5 was not played, and instead David Anton goes for a much more active plan. Instead, he decides to open up the center with the move e5. And that's a remarkable decision, because a lot of people follow this general guideline that when you're playing against the two bishops, you don't want to open up the position. That usually favors the side with the bishop pair. But okay, it's very concrete. Black is threatening to play e4 with a double attack on the bishop and knight. So black has to anticipate the move d takes e5. Knight takes e5, knight takes e5. Pieces are getting swapped, the center is open, and both sides have an isolated pawn on c3 and black on d5. The big question is, how is black going to recapture? I would think queen takes e5 is the most natural move, centralizing the queen, and the queen can be operated on various in various different directions. Looks very nice. Maybe even knight g4 is an interesting move, but David Anton plays in an even more aggressive way. Look at his next move. He goes for rook takes e5. So basically he says that the queen is already fine on c7. And well, the rook is looking for ways to come over to the king side. And definitely white underestimated the potential danger of that plan, because he played here the move rook f to c1. And this is very slow. Like, you're protecting the pawn on c3, but the pawn on c3 was not something really urgent. There were probably different ways of playing. Maybe white could have tried other moves, maybe c4, or try to anticipate potential attacking ideas based on rook h5. Let's see. Rook fc1 on the board. Black goes rook h5 with a big threat of taking on h2, and that could be just game over. You don't want to allow the queen to get that close to the white king. So the big question is, how should white defend here? In the game, h3 was played, but let's first have a look what happens in case of g3. Because then the diagonal is closed for good and the queen can never take on h2. How to increase the attack? Well, there is knight g4. So the knight and rook are both attacking the pawn on h2. This is a big threat. White is going to defend with h4. Do you see what is the key move now? Well, there is rook takes h4. Fantastic rook sacrifice. Because after g takes h4, it's queen h2, king f1. And now, before giving a check or anything else, we just make sure that knight e5 is an excellent move, so that the bishop is ready to come in, either to g4 or to h3, maybe in combination with knight f3. And this looks incredibly dangerous. Let me show you one line. For instance, if you try to run away with the king, we give a check. In case of bishop f1, we do play bishop g4, taking away more light squares from the king. And now knight f3 is a big threat. If the king would have to go to e2, there is knight d4 with a discovered check on the king and the knight and the queen. So that is absolutely crushing. If you play f4, well, there is queen takes e3 check, and after bishop e2, you can give a knight check on f3. Look, the king is just getting mated in this way. If you go to f1, it's mate on g1. If you go to d1, it's queen g1 as well, and mate to follow. So beautiful attacking motive, right? So what you see in this line is that white's pieces, they're too far away on the other side. They're unable to help the white king. Instead, white played the move h3, believing that everything is under control. But here black has a different idea. Material is still even, but not for long, because black is going to open up the king side in a very powerful manner. Let's see how. Bishop takes h3. It's a piece sacrifice, a bishop sacrifice in order to remove the pawns in front of the white king. G takes h3, rook takes h3. So the big idea is to follow up here with the move queen h2. If you try to prevent the queen from coming to h2 by means of f4, well, then there are no pawns guarding the king any longer. Pawn on e3 is weak, which can be taken already now. But even nicer is to bring the other rook into the game first. So that if queen g2 attacking the rook, it's rook e takes e3, hitting the bishop. But more importantly, rook coming to g3 is about to be played when the queen is pinned. Black is going to regain all the material with a devastating attack. So f4 doesn't help. Instead, white decided to run away with the king. And it looks as if the king is relatively safe in the center. If the pawns are still there, it will be difficult for black to penetrate into white's camp. But black still has a lot of attacking forces. Look, knight g4 played. Maybe it's not clear what the knight is going to do yet, but wait a second, guys. You'll be seeing it in a few moves. So the big question is, how should white try to defend? I think for me, the most obvious move here would be bishop f5. To pin the knight on g4 and the rook on h3. This was not played in the game, but there's a beautiful sequence now. Let me show you what could happen. It's knight takes e3 with a knight fork on the king and queen. If f takes e3, we do give a check on h1, forcing the king to go to the second rank. And now rather than bringing the queen in, because that doesn't make any sense, the white king is happy to come over to d3, black goes rook h2. And after king to d1, rather than taking the queen, we can even play a move like queen g3. Beautiful move with the mating threat of queen g1, and black will be winning the queen back anyway. After queen takes h2, we have a position with a queen versus a rook and two bishops. But black has a number of pawns, and well, a simple plan could be just try to bring up the pawn on the side where white is unable to defend. The king is open, the rook can come into the game, and white is never really able to play rook c2 because of a check on the back rank, and it's a skewer as the rook on a1 is going to be hanging. Black is technically winning here. For that reason, bishop f5 was not played, but it's a critical line which had to be calculated before. Instead, white played here the move king to e1, trying to run away, and in case it's needed, the bishop can always try to interfere, either on e2 or on f1. But look what David Anton had seen from afar. He came up with a brilliant second piece sacrifice. After sacrificing the bishop, now it's the turn for the black rook. Rook takes e3, what an amazing shot. After f takes e3, there would follow queen to g3 check. And the queen and knight are an amazingly strong attacking duo. There's no good way to escape here. If you would play, for instance, the move king to d1, it's knight takes e3, and we do win the queen back. It's game over. If you play king d2, same story. This time we take first with the queen on e3, and after king d1, it's knight f2 check. The king is caught in the middle. The only way to avoid mate is to take on f2, but then again, it's the queen versus a rook and two bishops, but the king of white is simply too vulnerable. And well, of course, also king f1, there is knight takes e3. So basically it's every time more or less the same. The white king is just too vulnerable. Instead, after rook takes e3, white decided to play here the move bishop to e2. But bishop e2, look what is going to happen. It feels like white is having everything under control, but black plays rook a to e8, an amazing idea. So you're bringing another piece with the idea to take on e2, for instance, and white is practically forced to take. You cannot keep the rook on e3 alive. But let me show you. If you overprotect the bishop on e2 with rook a2, then the queen will come in to h2, which is a powerful shot. Now queen takes f2 is a big threat, so f takes e3, but then it's queen g3 with a lot of threats. Similar ideas like knight takes e3 with check is gonna follow. Very similar to what happens in the game, in fact. In the game, there followed f takes e3. So let's have a look what happens in that case. It's queen g3 with check. Now, again, after king d1, it's knight takes e3 with a fork, and it's game over. Black has a crushing attack. If you go with the king to f1, we have a luxury choice. There are like 3 made-in-ones you can take with a knight on e3. Knight h2 is also made, and also queen f2. It's good enough, made-in-one. So white decided to put the king on d2, but that allows queen takes e3 with check. And now you see why it's so useful to have the rook into the attack already. Now the king should go back either to d1 or e1. It will actually come down to the same. Let's have a look. King d1 was played, but then there is queen to g1 with check. You don't really want to block with the bishop because it's just leading to mate. That's it. And now there is this move, king d2. This was the game's continuation. And, well, it looks as if black can just only give a check on e3. And then we have a repetition of moves that would only lead to a draw. But can you see the final blow of the game? It's black to play, and it's time to strike one more time. We have seen already a bishop and a rook sacrifice. And now it's number 3. It is rook takes e2. Fantastic shot. The king will have to take the rook. And now it's queen f2 check. And wherever the king goes, if you go to d1, it's knight e3 with checkmate. You're not even winning the queen. It's like checkmate. The queen and knight are a fantastic attacking duo. White lost in this way. If you would have played king d3, of course, it's also queen e3 with checkmate. So for me, this is one of the most amazing games of the year already. And a fantastic attacking performance. It's not something you see very often, that a super strong grandmaster like David Navarre is getting crushed in only 28 moves. But it's very typical. If you place your pieces on one side of the board, look at white's pieces. They are still doing nothing on the queen side. The other side is shifting the attention to the other side of the board. And that's why the attack worked out so brilliantly for black. If you do like this game, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And I will see you soon back again. Bye-bye.